Welcome to the Artist's Index. I'm Scott Bishop, your host for this episode. I'm a New Bedford-based singer, songwriter, and sound sculptor making music under the name Scapegoat. I also present the live concert series, Unexpected Music, which features South Coast musicians performing in non-traditional performing spaces around New Bedford. The In Focus podcasts are generously sponsored in part by Heavenly Spirits Importers and funded in part with grants from the New Bedford Cultural Council and the Fairhaven Cultural Council, local agency supported by the Mass Cultural Council, a state agency. I'd like to invite our guest to introduce himself and talk a little bit about what he does.
I'm Troy Henriksen. Troy Henriksen. Yeah.
Henrik's your middle name?
Henrik is my middle name, yeah. Born 1962, September 30th, St. Luke's Hospital, New Bedford, Massachusetts.
Wow, I live around the corner from St. Luke's. So,
yeah.
What was your upbringing around here?
My upbringing, my parents came from Norway. They were, they were immigrants after the war. My father was a fisherman. My mother came from a fishing family as well. And the two of them came here in the early 50s. And my father went to the Swain School in New Bedford, Mass. Right here in New Bedford. Yeah. And but then he had 4 kids, and he couldn't support them with his hopes of being an artist or an illustrator or whatever he was into. So he went back to fishing, and he became a big-time sea captain and boat owner here in New Bedford. And so I was brought up in that environment. So, my earliest memories of my father was he was drawing and sculpting and doing different things. And so we had anatomy books around the house and that kind of stuff. But then he went back fishing, and so I grew up idolizing my father, as most children, and I wanted to be like him and be a fisherman. And so I started going out to sea when I was 11 with him. My first trip was at 11 on the fishing, on the trade winds, which was an old Boston beam trawler. Which was the Wisconsin before that, and that painting is in this exposition. I painted that from my, from one of my fond memories, and so I grew up around the waterfront here. I went to Dartmouth School. I went to Westport School. My mother and father went bankrupt. My father went bankrupt somewhere around, 69, 70 or so. He went up to Alaska and fished up there. We went to Seattle with him. We followed him out there. So we drove across country with my mother, and that was a fantastic trip as a child. That had a big imprint on me. I was about, 7, 8 years old or so, and we drove across the United States, and it was like the summer of love was happening.
Oh, wow.
And I was up front with my mother in the car, a big old Oldsmobile with the radio blasting, listening to the Doors, looking out at the country go by. It was like my little Easy Rider journey across the United States. It was real colorful, and it informed me with a lot that still to this day, I have a good memory of that, because it was just fantastic time to drive across the country as a little child, because the music was just pumping, great music, 1969, 1970, right in that era. So if you got all that music going on with the family, not having to go to school. My father's bankrupt, mind you, but I don't care. It's just the happiest time of my life. We're living in a car for a little while, driving across the country.
Totally carefree. Mm-hmm. Wild. And how is that? How have you carried that with you? You mentioned the exhibition. So we're recording this at Co-Creative. Mm-hmm. Troy's exhibition, Gone Fishing, is in the main gallery area. I mean, I'm looking at the painting that has the trade winds ship on it that you mentioned right at the start.
Yep.
How else did those experiences inform these paintings?
Well, it's the subject is that, so I know it quite well. I know the smell of it. I know the feel of it. I know the suffering that takes place on board a ship. I know the joy, the happiness, all those. 2 weeks out on a ship, you go through a lot of emotions, a lot of states of being. And I know all those, and I know the sound of the engine, the feel of the ocean, the cold, the wet, all that. So that comes to the sensory when you're working on that. So it's all there. I will say that, having worked closely on a scalloper, which is dredging the bottom constantly. You're constantly dredging the bottom of the ocean, going through what you bring up, which is you want the scallops, but you got rocks, you got shells, you got fish, you got starfish, you got lobsters, you got bones, you got fossils, you got all kinds of stuff that's at the bottom of the sea. And you constantly sift through that. and that has a profound effect, in terms of a hands-on feeling with nature. And nature is the main source, it's the number one source for creativity, I feel. That connection to nature, even if I'm living in a city, it has been a strong foundation of me.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned living in the city. You've lived in Paris for how long now?
Since 1998, I went there.
Oh, so you're 25 years now.
Yeah. I've always been I grew up, in the suburbs and lived in Westport, which is country-esque.
Yes.
A lot of my friends worked on farms and stuff like that, and had a motorcycle and drove in the fields, and and did all that kind of stuff. But I had a hard time with the suburbs. I just didn't know what to do with myself. I became very bored, very depressed, and I just didn't know what to do with myself. And so I went to the cities. I love the cities. Like, there's this feeling of being out at sea, and then you're back in a city, and the city was adventure. Just open up any door, find something behind that door, So I lived that kind of life as a drunken sailor for quite a while. Just going into a city and having fun for a week and going back out to sea, So, but I've always liked cities. I like human beings. I like people watching. I like listening. I like all that stuff, the interactions with people. But as I'm getting older now, I'm starting to, as with this exposition, gone fishing, having a return to nature, I feel, so wanting to work more closely with the ocean and the thought of the shoreline, whether it's docks, boats, people's beaches, clam shacks, or what have you.
Well, and there's that element of, going to sea. Is there that element of you're kind of escaping people, but then you want to be back with them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, when you're in a city, you're not seeing a lot of nature, but out at sea, you're seeing nature in its kind of most protein form.
In that aspect, sure. Sure, it was funny. We were just out in Las Vegas and went out into the desert in the Monument Valley. That was once all sea. So there you are again. You're on the bottom. You're the land. So those were all. At one time, that was all ocean.
Wow.
So there's no water. And then in the city, you have the human nature, the aspect of the human nature, which is really beautiful too. Because I live in a building where I can hear people suffering, and I can hear people experiencing joy and pleasure. You hear the guy with TB dying across the hallway, and you hear the couple in love upstairs, and you hear a 6-year-old learning to play the violin, and you hear all that going on, not to mention all the noise outside the window, the police, the neighbors, the trucks, There's always something going on to just sit and listen to. But I guess a lot of that too is not being able to sit with myself, And as I've gotten older, and as I'm now the age I am, I've found more inner peace. So it's been nice also being out here in the countryside, seeing rabbits and birds and beautiful blue skies, and sitting in silence, which I'm finally able to do.
How did you get to that point?
What, sitting in silence?
Being able to be with yourself, it's a journey unto itself.
Right. Well, the one thing about fishing is you're forced to do that. 2 weeks out at sea, standing in one spot, it's factory work on the ocean. And so, you're forced to just like this room right here, we're going to stay in this room for a good week.
Right.
So it's a certain, it's not like being, in a prison, but it has, there's that sense of being confined, and then there's what you would call the prisoner of self, which is a whole other topic, which leads us to meditation, where we are not our minds.
Say more about that. I'm curious.
We are not our minds. Okay, the idea of being caught up in your mind, it lends more to Buddhism and meditation and being more in your heart rather than in your head. When you become stuck in your head, you become a prisoner of that and sort of tortured by your own thinking or your own thoughts. What depends on who you are or where you're at. But that whole idea of living in your heart rather than your mind which is a nice transformation to take place.
The heart is a place to live, but the mind is kind of a tool for accessing the heart and accessing out here and bringing the two together. That's what I hear.
Yeah, like Prince. You know, I'm drinking, by the way, Purple Rain. One of my favorite smoothies at People's Express, Purple Rain. I come here for my Purple Rain. Well, like Prince, he wrote, you know, this song, Purple Rain. He says the mind is for a filing cabinet. It's for doing mathematics. He goes, but I do my music in my heart. You know, so I kind of like that.
I love that. I mean, Prince is, of all the artists we've lost, I think I miss him the most. Because that, I mean, he not only created from the heart, I think his whole process was just, I'm here right now, I'm going to create this thing, Beautiful. I'm going to get it out in the world. I mean, some of my favorite songs of his are B-sides. They didn't even make the record. And just like, he was just nonstop creativity.
Yeah, no doubt. I miss David Bowie the most.
I miss Bowie too.
And I do a certain painting called the Zoe Bowie cat, and it's about a cat who's grieving the loss of David Bowie. So, and the cat has, you know, the Ziggy Stardust
those
stripes on his eyes, and I usually it's a fun painting I can do, and it's a big white cat with it looks like it wants to be Ziggy Stardust, this cat, and I'll pick a song by David Bowie and honor each painting by the song, which I'll write the text of the song on top of the painting.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, check it out, Troy Henriksen, Ziggy Stardust cat.
I have to see that series.
Yeah.
Are they on your website?
Yeah. I don't know. I can send them to you. They're on my Instagram. I know that.
Oh, great.
I've done maybe about 6 or 7 of them, and but whenever I don't know what to do, I can always do a Ziggy Stardust cat.
That's great to know. Like, there's this one series you can come back to. I haven't done all the songs yet. I can always come back to Ziggy Stardust.
Yeah, the Ziggy Stardust cat. I have different series. I have the domicile smoker. I have my building paintings. I have my heart paintings. I have my Arthur Rimbaud paintings. Different things I can come back to. But this exposition, Gone Fishing, is more. I've said, okay, let me try to honor the people of New Bedford in my past and paint more traditional way and paint, with the traditional techniques of painting with perspective and, not working from imagination, but from photos and, in reality. And which Don Wilkinson gave a nice review of.
He did. Yeah. I saw that.
And he pointed out to me that no matter how hard I try, I still can't get beyond my flatness.
Yeah, but your flatness is a strength. I think that's what I got out of what Don said.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Because it's part of your style and part of how you paint. And it's one of those things where, what would be a weakness for somebody else is a superpower for you.
Well, I've been trying to get away from that forever.
But it keeps hounding you.
It's where I'm at, It's the funny thing, It's just, that's the way it is, I keep thinking, I'm going to learn how to paint. I got to learn how to paint. I got to get this thing down. And that's been going on for 30 years. And I end up doing what I do.
But when you try that, do you find anything new opens up from that experiment?
Every time. Everything. Always. When I leave here, I want to go to the south of France and paint down there and be inspired from what's happening there.
Yeah.
And there's the paintings you do while you're not paying attention. Those are usually pretty interesting.
How so?
Well, you're working on one painting here and you got this other thing happening to the left where you kind of play around with it here and there and you disregard it, not give it much attention. And before you know it, it's kind of finished and someone will come in and go, hey, what's that over there? And I go, oh, that's just something I'm playing around with. And they're like, well, let me see some more of those.
You never know.
Yeah.
You never know what's going to hit people in that particular sweet spot. It's wild.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When did you start painting?
When I was born.
I love that.
Yeah, I was a natural born painter.
Yeah.
As soon as I could. And, so then I went to, I started drawing right away and all that kind of stuff and playing bongo drums and drumming. And then, of course, when you go to a school or there's, an art teacher, and God bless the art teachers out there and those people who go work with children, because it is really important and really needed to welcome that kid who's ready to start drawing and painting or needs to express themselves in a new, unique way that they're not able to do at home. I was dyslexic, and there was a bit of chaos going on at the house, and I needed an outlet to express a lot of things that I didn't yet have vocabulary for. This funny thing is, I grew up Norwegian parents, and they had like these trolls in the house, Norwegian trolls, and they were kind of like, these trolls were scary looking, and they were topless as well, and had breasts and mad hair, and I used to like to draw them, and because they were quite expressive and scary monster kind of things, and I started drawing them in church. At Sunday school, and I realized I got in trouble drawing them, and because they were that aggressive and frightening looking. So then I realized, hey, wait a minute, I can upset people here with a pencil and a piece of paper. I'm breaking some taboos by making a drawing. What is this? So that became quite fun, and then so. For people forever saying, I think you should take a look at your son's drawings. And then, of course, if you look at a war film, and the Vietnam War was going on, so that was what the TV was pumping out. There was upheaval as there always is in the culture. People getting assassinated, murders. I can't imagine being 8, 9 years old today and having to go into a school saying, okay, we have to prepare for a shooter today. Right. So I was drawing drawings that express that kind of pathological violence within the culture already, and so you gotta give kids an outlet to express all that stuff and that freedom, because we live in a violent society.
We always have.
And
we kind of sleep on that, but it's like the kids have their antenna up. They pick up what's going on around them, and there's more input coming in via things like social media and endless opportunities to stream programming, plus what you mentioned, like the threat of something happening at school, where every school is having shooter drills.
And hopefully some of these kids that may not be coming from a well-balanced home to begin with, and then you go out into the world. If you got to have some kind of an expression, whether it, for some kids it might be football, or in my case, it was the arts,
So you're an artist, you're a musician, you're also an author.
Yeah.
Have you been all those things at once? Do you do one at a time?
Well, I've been doing all of them, and I've been doing all of them for quite a while. The music, I was a drummer for a long time, and painting, I started into that. And writing kind of was real late. I started writing poetry in my 20s, but then that went into actual sentences that made sense, and then that went into paragraphs, and that went into pages, and that went into chapters.
Suddenly you got a book.
Writing is just a beautiful experience. But I couldn't do that with a child and a wife, a family life. It was too draining because you're absent too much of the time. And I couldn't make any money spending 10 hours a day writing. But I could make some money spending 10 hours a day painting. I could pay my rent and support a family. But writing, you really zone out to another world. It's like literally being in another world.
Music can be like that too.
Music is great. Music is simple. I write folk songs and I turn them into rock and roll, and then I share that with the music community in Paris, and we make that into songs with different musicians. So I love being a part of having a musical family I belong to. Music people are great. I grew up, I took drum lessons from Al Mello here in New Bedford, and I was a part of the drum community here. And that's a beautiful thing to be a part of, the music community in general. I just love it, because music people are great. And whether it's guitars or whatever your thing is, you know. So I switched to guitar when I was probably about 45. Yeah, I went through a severe depression, and I went into a treatment center. I was having trouble with addiction. That came back. I went to a treatment center with a guitar, and I learned to play guitar. So, and funny enough, Marc Chagall's son was in there. I probably shouldn't say that, but he taught me the guitar.
Marc Chagall's son taught you guitar?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, which was kind of fascinating. And,
surreal.
It's totally surreal, because I was in there. My life, I had messed up bad, you know, and I needed to go to a treatment center, and my son was 2 years old, and I went in there, and I was a mess. And this was in France, and I brought this guitar with me, and I went in there and I started doing artwork in there, and this and that, and I'm like, oh my God, what's my son gonna do when he gets older? And I'm telling this all to this guy, you know, and he's teaching me guitar, and I'm sharing, you know, what do I do? I'm an artist. My son is 2. He goes, you know what? My father's an artist too. And I was like, really? What's he do? And he goes, oh, he does figurative kind of things, and, you know, dreamscapes, and, you know, violin players in the sky. And I was like, that just sounds pretty nice. Maybe I know his work. What's his name? He goes, Marc Chagall.
Oh, is that who?
And I was like, oh, really? I said, you know, some people say my work's a little like Marc Chagall. And so that was a beautiful, meaningful moment in my life, and that's where I learned to play 3 chords. And he taught me 3 chords, and I sang songs to him in the smoking room of the treatment center. And so that I knew, you know, I was like, I'd had enough of antidepressants, all that stuff. I grabbed the guitar. I was situated with my painting in a good place. I knew what I was doing. I could make money, but I also needed an uplift. You know, I had a family now. I had all these responsibilities on my back, and I didn't want to take antidepressants. And so I started playing guitar. And I said, well, if I'm going to have depression, I'm going to do it like Leonard Cohen.
There you go.
You know, so that was a dark moment that I made it through, and because bad times do pass and they do come. And I want that to be known to anybody listening, and they always pass. And I know, you know, that was one of the dark times for me, and so the guitar was real helpful. So while I didn't know what to paint, and while I was, you know, repeating myself and having feelings of like, oh no, what am I, I'm a failure, all that kind of stuff, but working through it, I had the guitar to strum and learn and create songs, simple little, like, songs with 3 chords and, you know, basic poetry, you know.
And you'd already been a writer, so the words probably weren't a problem.
Yeah, no. This was before I was writing books or anything like that. I was always writing poetry, writing on napkins. That was definite. Always studying language, you know, through my painting, because I always wrote on the canvas. So when I did a lot of writing on the canvas in English in France, which was kind of fun, because I have a lot of collectors I've taught English that way.
That you've taught them English through your paintings?
Yeah. But very, you know, very, very simple kind of expressions, you know, and you know, very simple expressions and different things like that. And a lot of my collectors have kids and have families, and so these children grew up around my paintings, and my little English words all over the place, sayings, poems, and
David Bowie lyrics.
David Bowie lyrics.
Great way to teach people English. When did writing in your painting come into play? Was there any source of inspiration for that?
Right away. I mean, when I discovered painting, I was 27, and I was living in Boston, and once again, I was very depressed, very, very depressed, and almost to a point where I was suicidal. You know, I did a lot of drugs as a teenager. I got off them when I was 21, lived in a halfway house. I was clean and sober about 5 years, and I was more depressed than ever. And I was in therapy, and I was like, oh man, what's all this, you know? And I was like, I've had enough. I don't want to live anymore. So it's one thing to know that you don't want to live anymore. It's another thing to decide how you're not going to live. That's quite a bottom to hit. And so that's when I discovered painting. And when I started painting, a new lease in life came over me, and I felt absolutely great, freed of everything, and I was able to express exactly what was going on in me, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, and I threw it onto the canvas, and I understood this was a place where there were no rules, and there were already a category for me. I was considered an outside artist. I was like, how cool is that? There's already a category for me. There was already an audience. So, so I started showing my work in the cafes in Boston, and I started meeting the nicest, kindest people who were into outsider artists.
Nice.
Yeah, it was, so that's the beauty of art. There's room for everybody, So I submitted some paintings to the Copley Society on Newbury Street, and I got in. I won a contest. I won a contest like some kind of submit your work thing, and they picked 10 people to be in the show, and I was in it. I was in it 3 times, 3 years in a row. I got in it, so I was like, wow, this is great, and all it was utilizing what I had learned as a child, which was this freedom of creating. And I understood that if you tried, you could make it happen.
Reminds me of Picasso, who said, I spent my whole life trying to learn how to draw like a child again. Mm-hmm. And it's like taking yourself back to the source. And, again, you mentioned the brain and, that swirl of activity in there, kind of bypassing that to get to what the source is, which is what kids generally do.
Yeah. Except I never learned to draw as good as Picasso to return to that.
Who has, right? Yeah, not many.
But I understood, imagination and sense of color, and I used to do the contests on the back of the cereal boxes.
Oh yeah, I remember.
You know
those.
what I mean? You too can be an artist.
Just color in this cartoon mouse.
Yeah.
Or this pirate.
Yeah, so the thing is, if you're passionate enough about your expression, people will take you seriously, so as, like I had this, we used to do, once a year we used to, at the gallery I was in Paris, France, Galerie W, we did what was called Pas de la Peinture, and it was paintings for children. So all children could come to the gallery and work with the artists. So we'd have like hundreds of kids working. So this one little girl, she made her painting, and she went and showed it to the gallerist, and she's like, take a look, what do you think? And the gallerist said, that's a beautiful painting. She said, that's not a painting, that's my feelings. So that's so what are you going to say? What are you going to do? Marcel Duchamp, he said the future of painting, now that we've come to this after the ready-made.
The ready-mades.
Right. So when you explain a ready-made to a child, like this mic stand here with this, microphone on it, if you say that's your art, I cannot prove it's not. It's a ready-made. When a child understands that, they're like, why on earth would you want to go pick up a paintbrush and do all that work? If this is already art, it's a ready-made.
If I could just find something, put it on a table and call it art, then why would I never do it?
Once a child sees that and understands that, which they will through going through, hanging around a museum and art people long enough, and they'll see that what a ready-made is, if that expresses what you want to or need to express, the only people left to express are the people who really need to.
Right.
And that's what Marcel Duchamp said. So that's where I came in, and I started thinking of myself as a conceptual artist who was going to paint. And if I was to reverse the process of my paintings, they would all wind up in the art store. So all my future work was all in the art store.
Just take people to Blick.
So,
it's like, here's my exhibition.
Yeah. So what made the work was my spirit.
That's very Bowie-esque too, because I remember reading something from Bowie where he's like, not really even a fan of music. It's just a vehicle for my ideas.
Right.
And, that was kind of mind-blowing, because you think of, Bowie with all these different stylistic changes and persona changes, and he's like, must be a big music fan. He's like, no, this is just stuff I assimilated to express the ideas I have. So,
Right.
I guess Bowie could have just taken you to a record store and said the same thing. Like,
Right.
Have fun. These are my ideas.
Yeah, exactly. That's fascinating. That's where we become, more of the person and understand what it is to be the artist.
But we all have artistic capacities.
Absolutely. And then Joseph Bowie's, said everyone's an artist.
Yeah. A lot of people don't recognize it in themselves, that's the tragedy to me, is that we all have that capacity, and for whatever reason, some people it gets suppressed or beaten down, or they don't see where it's actually happening, that they're creating something.
Funny, that's what's fascinating about growing up or being in non-artistic environments. There are moments where you get to be artistic. Mm-hmm. So it's like if you're painting the hull of a boat,
Yeah.
So there's a guy out there with a brush, you got 4 or 5 guys painting. When it's time to clean the brush, the talented guy will make a little painting somewhere on the side.
Of course.
Or if you're painting lines in a street, the yellow lines, there's a moment where that guy is going to try to do something artistic, or if you're working with spray paint, you got to spray paint the street, this line's got to be cut, that one over there, there's these moments where...
I'm going to sign that.
Yeah, yeah.
So, did you get from Boston to Paris? That's because you got to Paris at like 30 or so, or
35.
35. So what was the journey from Boston, where you picked up painting, you start to exhibit, to Paris?
Oh, I just walked out of the apartment and left the TV.
It's that simple.
Left the TV running, didn't even shut the door, just left.
Wow.
Yeah, the TV was running. It was a big old Sony.
One of those old tube TVs.
Yeah, I did a painting on the wall called "The End of Bohemian," and it was. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I took photos of the wall. I was painting in this. It was affordable housing, and it was up on by Berkeley School of Music, and I met a lot of students from France at Berkeley, and I had this apartment, and it was 1 bedroom, and I used it as my painting studio, and I'd been painting in there for about 5 years. And nonstop, all the time, around the clock, working like crazy. And I was just like, that's it, man. I'm going to France. I'm out of here. And I just left. I did a painting on the wall, took some photos of it, and walked out.
And those Philistines probably painted it over after they rented the apartment out again.
I'm sure of that. I'm sure of that.
And then once you got to Paris,
Well, I had photographs of all my work. I had been selling my work through photographs in cafes in Boston. I took Polaroids and just hung around and, went out and, sold them that way. That was, I guess, sort of Instagram in reality.
Yeah.
And
down to the square format.
Yeah, and so I did the same thing when I got to France and started meeting people in cafes and found the right cafes to hang around in and met the right people who wanted to buy art and started selling art right then and there. Yeah. And then started painting in the streets, selling art, and and then met a woman I fell in love with. We had a child within a year. I met my gallery within a year. He started selling my work and started, just took off.
Wild.
Yeah.
And so what's it like living in Paris? Like I've never even been as a tourist.
It's great. It's absolutely great. It's a rite of passage for all artists to come and spend at least 3 months there. I was inspired by, the abstract expressionists here come out of New York City, and the Black Mountain Ridge School, like Cy Twombly, Robert Rauschenberg.
Oh yeah, Rauschenberg.
Hans Hoffman, Mark Rothko, Robert Motherwell. I was inspired by all those guys, and they all spoke about having to go to Paris. They went to Paris, they went to Rome. They did their stays in Europe to enrich themselves through European art, and they all understood that was mandatory.
So, that was a common rite of passage back then.
So I figured, well, let me do now's my turn, and I had a neighbor who was a Buddhist, and his name was Clarence. He was Buddhist, and he was also a painter. And he said, "Troy, you just got to go. You don't even think about it. You just go, and everything you need will follow you." So I was like, "Clarence, you know what? You're right. And I'm not going to hang around here anymore." I just left the apartment and
That's
went.
when you left.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what's it like to come back to New Bedford? How often do you come back, and then when you're here for a few weeks, what's it like to visit and see the city as it is now, as opposed to when you were growing up?
Oh, it's beautiful. I love it. I love coming back, especially this time with this exposition. You know, I love it. I love the area. I love the people. I love being back. You know, but I've been, you know, over there for, 30 years paying in taxes and my retirement and all that stuff, and I got my medical and my health and my collectors, and my son has grown up there and all my friends are there, but I love coming back here and painting while I'm here.
And we even got you for a gig here.
Yeah.
So we had you for AHA night playing your songs. And you're in the gallery with your artwork, which I just thought was absolutely magical.
Yeah, and I can't wait, I hope to have more exhibitions in the area, so any galleries, please.
There's more than a few. I'm sure there'll be plenty to take you up on that offer.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing I wanted to circle back on was you talked about these series of paintings, and the one question I wanted to ask is, what's it like to have those series to go back to when you're like, maybe you're dry, maybe you're not, no ideas. You mentioned the Bowie series, but other ones. When you feel like you need to turn to one of those series, how does that work? Do you just go, I'm just gonna something in that style?
Yeah, just go make it. And see where it takes me. I also, we spoke about nature. I'll say that springtime is an open window. And it took me a long time to understand that. I was always, searching for the magic I've experienced in creating. It's almost like for an alcoholic, he's always looking for that magic that he once knew in a drink or a drug. He's trying to recapture it all the time. It's the same thing with painting. You're trying to look for that magic moments where the light is perfect, everything comes into play, and no matter what you do is poetry. You want that, right? But that doesn't exist all the time. But I found out it does exist in the springtime. I always thought it was a cliche, the light, the light is good here, it's a good time to work. I always thought that was a cliche, but it's very true. Springtime is a harvest, it's a time when all the flowers are in bloom, everything in nature comes alive in springtime. It coincides with astrology, it coincides with the earth, everything. So springtime would come along and I'd have this outburst of creativity where I could paint a painting a day, two a day. It's just like, wow, just this, fabulous run of creativity, of all this interesting, exciting work. And it would go away, naturally. And I'd be like chasing it, trying to get back those moments. But, the earth had moved on.
You made me think of this book I read a few months ago, Van Gogh's Ear. This woman researched what actually happened to Van Gogh in Arles, the night that he cut off his ear. But what she also did was research the whole background the community had, because we have a vision of Van Gogh as the solitary artist, and in fact he had a lot of friends there. But she actually went to Arles and she spent spring there, and she said the light is exactly the way Vincent painted it.
Oh yeah.
It's just that, and so when you talked about that kind of magical springtime light, I thought of that, like, you think that's just, we're seeing it through Van Gogh's eyes, that's his interpretation. She's like, no, the light is actually like that. And the reason he could paint all that was the light was inspiring, and he got on exactly the kind of role you described. Yeah,
it gets turned on. Yeah, I've been to Arles, and you want to understand his paintings, go to Arles.
Yes.
It will.
I desperately want to do that. And when you mentioned, doing the 3 months in France, I'm like, now I have to talk to my wife and kids. I'm a musical artist as opposed to a visual artist, but now I'm like, can we get 3 months there? What's going on?
Yeah. You'll have to let me know.
Yeah, I will. And as you're creating, as you're painting, are there just moments where like, this is guitar time, this is songwriting time?
Well, guitar time is every time, all the time.
Nice.
That's what's nice about guitar. I can play guitar while I'm painting, and I usually do.
You got it strapped on, and you like to strum some chords.
Yeah. The guitar's nearby. I don't have the urgency to write songs as much as I was, because I don't need another song, to be honest with you. And But when a good idea comes along, that's when I'll work on a song, and so I have a good idea for a song, I'll work on it, and that's something you can do while you're walking as well. Once again, we were talking about being a prisoner of the mind. It's about putting the mind to use, to work, so it can be working on a song while I'm walking, or the text, or the rhythm.
Using your mind for imagination instead of recycling the thoughts that are already in there.
Yeah.
I can relate to that, and I want to do more of that.
Mm-hmm.
Troy, is there anything we haven't talked about that you'd like to cover?
Well, no, I think we've covered it all. I said I want to thank Dana for letting me have this exhibition here, the people who turned me on to the gallery here, and it's been very good. It's
a great space as well. This was a really great space for your work, I thought.
Yes, yeah. I've touched upon the need to express, and as always, anybody going through a dark time, hang in there, reach out. You're definitely not alone or unique. And, and God bless all the art teachers who touch all the young kids who are out there, our future creators.
Yep.
It's all good stuff, and so, we're human beings. We need to create, not to destroy. There's enough destruction going on out there. Let's create beautiful, wonderful things, and that's what I'm all about anyways.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I have 5 remaining questions I like to ask. There are a couple of variations because you're a painter. I'm usually talking to musicians. My first question is, if you could have one painting from another artist hanging on your wall, any artist ever, who is the artist and what painting of theirs would you want hanging on your wall?
Oh, okay. Wow, there's many, Hey, I'll take the Scream.
Yeah.
I'll take the Scream, sure.
Why the Scream?
Well, okay, it's on cardboard.
Right.
It's Edvard Munch, he's Norwegian. It's a turning point in art. I mean, of course, we could say the Mona Lisa, all that kind of stuff. But I like the Scream because, it's an expression of his anxiety, of the future, all that kind of stuff. And it's a change in painting of a new direction,
Suddenly you could express that anxiety, that fear.
Yeah, and it's what I think we need more of.
Yeah.
We got good cameras, we got things that can replicate things pretty good. We need to replicate the hidden and unseen emotions that are lying around here that are getting expressed in other ways that we don't want anymore.
Yeah. Because they have to get out.
They have to get out. They have to be, that's what I like about Francis Bacon. He, people with like eating disorders and things like that, they don't see themselves as they really are. So therefore their self-image is not matching. But yet, if you could get that image for them to see, I think they would be relieved in what they're experiencing. And that's what I understand Francis Bacon to be about. He was able to create this traumatized face that gave, a visualization to the horror that he possibly felt, or we all felt, as the turn of the century came upon us with all that trauma that was waning. I think it was what's his name? Sigmund Freud said, after the analysis of ego, we no longer see ourselves as the way we used to. So that constantly has to be looked at.
Got it. On a musical note. One record you take to a desert island if you had to choose one album.
Oh, well, to one album?
Just one.
Oh, well, probably one of mine. No.
Why not? You know yourself.
No, of course it would be Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd, for myself, yeah.
What is it about that record? I mean, I know it's an all-time classic.
There's enough mystery there, and it's a window, and as a teenager, it was always there for me as I was going through whatever pain I may have gone through as a young kid and stuff. It's always reliable. It has such beauty. It is the internal dialogue of someone looking out at the world and trying to make sense of it. There's tragedy there, there's beauty there, there's other dimensions to find. It's just so rich. And in fact, the book, I'm writing a book now called, it's finished, Miracle on Sawyer Street. And it's about a boy who discovers this Pink Floyd album. And he thinks it fell from the sky just for him to find. And it coincides with other things going on in his life.
You know, it's funny because I've had records like that in my life, and I'm sure Dark Side of the Moon has been that for millions of people. I love Dark Side of the Moon, but there are other records that felt like they fell out of the sky into my life at exactly the time I needed it, and it's uncanny. You feel like you've discovered, you know, like some magical musical unicorn that never existed before.
Right.
Who is one super sneaky secret influence on you? Someone that maybe people would not expect.
An influence on me?
A sneaky influence.
Geez. Well, I don't know. For, what do you mean, in general?
Maybe in general. It could be in painting, it could be in music, it could be in writing.
Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee! That is surprising.
Yeah.
How so?
Because I find him to be fascinating. You know, he's like to be like water. Be like water. He's an entertainer. You know, boxers are fighters, things like that. Just off the top of my head,
Bruce Lee is great. That's a great answer because I can see it in a way.
Yeah,
because
for someone you wouldn't expect, you know what I mean. I love all the I love Goya, because he went on so late in life and he saw so much darkness and managed to capture so much of it and continue, and then winds up in France with a child and a young wife and all that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he can't hear. He's gone deaf.
Wild.
So, there's a
lot of influences in there.
Yeah,
All right. So your choice of a musician, living or dead, you'd want in your band, or an artist you'd want to share a studio with.
What? What's that?
So this is a little random, but who is a musician, living or dead, you want in your band, or if you prefer, an artist, living or dead, that you would want to share a studio with?
Well, I would love to have shared a studio with Van Gogh. Yeah. From what I understand, he was kind of a lonely guy, and he was all excited about meeting up with Gauguin, and he painted the sunflowers and decorated the house for him to come. He wanted to create this artist community. When he had this woman he was taking care of and her child. I understand the guy was really longing for a family. He's constantly reaching out to his brother, and I think I could have been a good friend to him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and he needed that.
Yeah,
him and Gauguin were not the best mix. But it was very clear, and that's the thing about reading this book, Van Gogh's Ear, was just, I had no idea that what Vincent was trying to do was create an artist community in Arles. That was ultimately his desire, because of that picture of him as this super lonely guy, but being lonely and looking for a connection they're not incompatible. It's quite the opposite.
Right.
Last question. What is your South Coast happy place? One place in New Bedford or the surrounding area that when you visit, like, I gotta go there?
While I'm here? Well, I mean, to be happy?
Well, I call it a South Coast happy place. It's a place that you just really love visiting.
Well, I always like to visit, where I lived, Robert Street in Westport. There's a pond there. At the end of the pond, a Sadi Pond, they call it. At the end, there's a little pond there, and I like to visit that. And, of course, down on the docks, Pier 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yep.
Well, Troy, thank you so much. Great conversation.
Right.
I'm so glad you're back. I know you're heading back to France tomorrow, but your artwork will be here at Co-Creative through the end of June, and looking forward to more exhibitions here. Get you back, maybe do another show. Bring the guitar, or leave the guitar behind you bought at the pawn shop up the street.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I do. I can't bring it with me.
So somebody has to store it.
Yeah, I bought a Yamaha at the Pond Street on Union Street here. And it worked fine.
Yeah. Keep it somewhere safe, and then when you come back, plug in and play.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for another In Focus podcast, which is generously sponsored in part by Heavenly Spirits Importers and funded in part with grants from the New Bedford Cultural Council and the Fairhaven Cultural Council, local agencies supported by the Mass Cultural Council, a state agency. I'm Scott Bishop, and thanks for listening to the Artists Index.